that?
A mouse named Shawna. The wind whipped past my face. The air was like nothing I had ever experienced. It was all new to me. The cold, the wet, the rain. I had never been on a boat before. I had never expected to have to leave my home in India. "Shawna, come down under deck. No one wants you to fall off the boat." I looked up and saw my grandmother standing in the open doorway leading to where me and my brothers and sisters slept. "Yes, Grandma," I said as I hurried toward her. Under the deck, Grandma and Mama had set up blankets for us little mice to sleep on. I was the eldest. Then came Kiki, then Bala, then Lychee. I sat down next to Mama on our bed. She wrapped her paw around my shoulders. I shivered. When we left India 2 months before, she had promised that we would have a better life when we reached America. I crawled over to my trunk. I had only been allowed to bring a few of my belongings to the new world with me. I opened the trunk's lid and sighed. I had a few extra saris, a map of where we were headed, a book of fairy tales, and a small stone box my father had given me right before he died. I pulled the box out to examine it. It was small and had a few tiny gemstones pressed into the lid. I had to put down the box when I started to tear up. It was so awful how he had died. Why had the falcons come for him? Why did it have to be my father? That was why my mother had put my family on this horrid boat. We had to leave India before the falcons came for us, too. Still, I have no desire to leave India. I don't think things like that, Shawna. This move was a good thing. We would have a better life, a new start, and no falcons. "Shawna, it's time for all little mice to sleep. Come," Grandma said in her soft old voice. I nodded and put all of my belongings back into the trunk. "Good night, Grandma," I said to the old mouse as she tucked me in. The first time I had had to sleep on a boat, I was awake all night. But now the gentle rocking was sort of comforting, I thought, as I slowly drifted off to sleep. "Oh my! Oh my! We're here! We're here!" I was awakened by little mouse feet jumping all around me. There was shouting and running and chaos. I sleepily opened my eyes. "Shawna, we're here! We're in America!" my sister Lychee squeaked. I leapt from my bed and ran to the upper deck. It was true. There, on the horizon, was America. I was mesmerized. There were so many buildings and so many people, and they all looked different. Some had white fur and some had brown, and there were even some with black fur. They were all wearing strange clothes and buying strange food in the market. I was bouncing with excitement, until I remembered this was not our new home. This was just where our boat was landing. We were going to live with Grandma's friend Elsa. She lived on the prairie. I rushed back down to the sleeping place and changed from my traveling clothes into one of my saris. I chose a bright green one to accent my light brown fur. We disembarked straight into the city square, where people greeted other people and watched and waited to see if anyone they knew got off the boat. I stayed close to Grandma. She had been here before and knew the streets and the culture better than me and Mama. I watched as men in horse-drawn buggies drove recklessly down the cobblestone road. Everything was new and fantastic. That is, before I noticed all of the people looking at me. "Grandma, why do they watch us so?" I asked over the noise of the crowd. "They do not know a lot about our lifestyle, little mouse. They do not understand, just as you do not understand them," she replied. I considered this and nodded. 1 hour later, we boarded the wagon that would take us to the prairie. I disliked this even more than the boat. At least the boat had been clean. This smelled strongly of horse and dust, which was a terrible mix. "So, where are you folks headed this fine day?" I heard a boy mouse's voice say from behind me. I watched him silently as he spoke. He was nothing like any boy mouse I had ever seen. He was tall, for a mouse, and he was all white, and he was wearing the oddest hat. He noticed me looking at it and said, "You like it? It ain't much, but sure done keep the sun off." He smiled at me. I didn't smile back. I had been taught to stay quiet in a man's presence. He cocked his head at me. "Ain't one for talking, are you?" I stayed quiet. He shrugged. "Whatever you like, ma'am," he said. After the longest, smelliest ride of my life, We arrived in the tiny town where Aunt Elsa, we call her Aunt because she and Grandma are so close, lived. I hopped off the wagon as soon as it stopped. I looked around for a mouse that looked like what Grandma had said Elsa looked like. The crowd wasn't thick here. In fact, the place looked almost deserted. Grandma allowed the boy mouse to help her down to the ground. She squinted and let out a joyous cry. Elsa! There, standing on the porch of what had been the market, was an old mouse that looked like she had seen a lot in her life. She came running to greet us with a smile that was just infectious. She hugged Mama and then us little mice, and then, to my great surprise, she said, I see that you met Eli, my grandson. The boy mouse, Eli, smiled and said, Yes, ma'am. I must have looked lonely that night as we ate dinner, because what Aunt Elsa suggested as we sat around the dinner table implied that I was. Eli, do you remember the dance the town is having by the railroad tonight? Elsa asked. Eli nodded. Maybe you could take Shawna with you. Introduce her to some of the folks here. I'm sure she'd like it, Elsa said with a bright smile. I wanted to protest, but I wouldn't dare disrespect Elsa. Sure, well, I reckon she'd like it too, Eli said to me. Later that evening, Eli came up to my room. I was sitting on my bed, looking at my little box. What's that? Eli asked me. A present from my papa, I said. It's pretty, he said. Are you ready to go? He asked me. I nodded. As we walked to the railroad, Eli tried to start many a conversation. So, what'd you say your favorite color be? I shrugged. He tried again. What kinds of food did y'all eat back in India? I didn't answer. I didn't want to talk about India. I didn't want to talk at all. He tried one more time. Shawna, where's your pa? He was looking at me really meaningfully. He died before we left India, I said. Eli was quiet for a moment. Both my parents are dead too, he said. I know how you feel. I'm mighty sorry, Shawna, he said. I looked at him for the first time since we started walking. Maybe I could get used to living here, with Elsa, with Eli, without Papa. We walked in silence for a while. Then I saw a blazing light up ahead. Before I could ask, Eli said, We're here. I saw what he meant. There, in the middle of the prairie, was the railroad. We ran down the hillside and stopped at the bottom. I had never seen a real railroad before, just photos. It was better than I could have ever dreamt. There was light and music and dancing, and for the first time in a while, I was happy.